guilty on all counts, Megan. So how surprising is this, given what you followed over, a month's worth of testimony here and 2 days of jury deliberations?
Absolutely. A 6-week trial, 9.5 hours of jury deliberation after some 80 hours of witness testimony. There was a lot of speculation here that with such a high-profile trial, with so much witness testimony from Stormy Daniels, from Michael Cohen, really major characters here, about what exactly was going to happen. I think a lot of folks who have watched Donald Trump over the past several years really felt that he was Teflon Don, as the nickname is, that nothing has ever stuck to him. And you know, that said, we don't know how far this will follow Donald Trump, whether this will matter in November's election. We know that he's sure to push back on this verdict, but we do know that at this point that he's been found guilty on 34 charges. I think that will come as a surprise to many people who have watched him for many years.
This is an emergency news bulletin from we here at the Magnolia Media Network. Trump found guilty on all 34 counts. There was no pause whatsoever. He didn't get a break on a single charge. All 34 counts, he was found guilty on all 34. And when asked as he left the courtroom by a single journalist, why should an American vote for a man who has been found guilty of a crime, of 34 crimes to be specific? The same silence I just gave you was the silence that he gave the reporter. He had no good answer for why he should be elected. Donald Trump is now a convicted felon. There's no more just guessing. You heard it in the opening, the little intro that I played for you. Donald Trump guilty on all 34 counts. I want to welcome you to this Magnolia Media emergency news bulletin as Mango Mussolini has finally been held accountable in the courtroom of Justice Merchan in the state of New York, in the city of New York, in Lower Manhattan, by a jury of his peers. And for those on the right who will say it's not his peers are the average people, Donald Trump went to the University of Pennsylvania, an Ivy League college. He inherited $400 million from his millionaire father. He blew all of that. That wasn't good enough. So he had to blow that up by over-investing in casinos that were competing with each other, casinos he owned in Atlantic City, New Jersey. And by the way, as far as changing the skyline of New York City, he's got one skyscraper there. The other buildings were just buildings he purchased, or buildings that had licensing agreements with him. At one point, there were 2,500. Now there are less than a handful. Trump-branded buildings in Manhattan. The last thing Donald Trump built was that Chicago Trump Tower that was part of The Apprentice back in 2008 or 2009, which, by the way, the losses from that building were so staggering that he's been able to use that as a tax shield for the last 11 or 12 years, essentially moving money from his left pocket to his right pocket. Donald Trump is a thief, a crook, a criminal, a threat to American society. Project 2025 should scare every American. And I know those people who are weeping on social media, making absolute idiots of themselves, saying, Trump, help us, save us. He can't save himself. He had to be rushed out so he could have his diaper changed, for Christ's sake. Come on now. But those people have gone down the MAGA and QAnon rabbit hole. They're so far down it, they're really beyond reproach. There's no cure for them. There's no cure for the sickness that has infested their brain. They're lost in a delusion that somehow Trump was anything more than a con man, a liar, a cheat. And now we have proof that he was a con man, a liar, and a cheat, and it's part of the reason he got himself elected in 2016, because he, David Pecker, and Michael Cohen worked in concert to make sure the Stormy Daniels story didn't break right after the October surprise of the Access Hollywood tape broke. Those two things combined would have absolutely made Hillary Clinton president of the United States. We would have avoided the additional costs that were the Trump tax cuts. You remember those? That cost us $2.7 trillion a year because they were non-funded tax cuts, meaning they weren't able to actually cut anything. And of course, the only thing they can think of to cut is Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, which only helps working class families. Either that or completely dump the Affordable Care Act, which is where, private entrepreneurs like myself go to get our health insurance, to make sure we can see the doctor, to make sure we have access to the, at least 1/10 of what someone like Donald Trump has access to, despite the fact he's a paper billionaire, meaning who knows what his stock will be worth by the time he's actually able to sell it. Of course, I'm talking about his stock in Truth Social, which is another scam he's been allowed to perpetrate on the American people and American investors, international investors at this point. Managed to push the stock back up to about $60. It opened at 79, dropped all the way down into the 20s. Then they started publishing manuals on how to beat short sellers. Eventually, the short sellers are going to make a fortune because this stock will go to $0.00. At the very least, it'll be below $1. It'll be a penny stock. It'll be something like what Jordan Belfort was trying to sell in The Wolf of Wall Street. That's what we're talking about. That's the level of con. That's the level of lie. I want to thank our small audience for tuning in to this Magnolia Media breaking update, because we need each and every one of you. In order to keep us on the air, we need 1,000 listeners per month. On my Instagram account, which is really our corporate Instagram account, Magnolia John 2024, we need 10,000. 10,000 folks to go over. Doesn't cost anything, but then I have the opportunity to do things like sell badges, sell merchandise, monetize an account that will all go back to paying for the production of this podcast, to give you information in the southeastern United States that you won't usually get, because we live in an information desert when all you have is local news, which has been bought up by right-wing interests, especially in states like Tennessee, from the very pathetic WVLT to the even more pathetic I take that back, WATE Channel 6 News here in Knoxville is probably better than WVLT Channel 8 News, and Channel 10, who the hell knows what's going on over there. We don't pay any attention to them anyway. We are in an information desert, and that's why this podcast exists, because we are in an information desert. The only information these people get is Fox News, because they live in this herd mentality. Everybody they go to church with watches Fox News. The pastor recommends Fox News because he's acting as, a political activist and not a reverend, which means his church should be taxed at 80 or 90%, because these evangelical right-wing churches are nothing more than hotbeds of lies and conspiracy. I mean, we had one of the MAGA ministers recently saying that with all of the gifts brought to Jesus, a figure who may or may not have existed, at the time of his birth, he essentially inherited $1 million the day he was born, the night he was born, December 25th, the year 1 or whatever. Really? That's where we're at. We're these ministers who want you to give them millions of dollars so they can buy private jets to fly around the world and spread more lies. And that's what it is. It's a scam. It's been a scam. It'll be a scam tomorrow. It was a scam for the last 2,000 years. There's nothing good about this or these people. And now they've turned to a new messiah and Donald J. Trump. Yes, Donald Trump, a con man, a liar, a convicted rapist in a civil court, I admit, but rape nonetheless. This is who they turn to. This is the man who's going to make America great again. When exactly was America so great? We have to go back to the 1950s when we had pensions instead of 401ks, which is really just a way for wealthy executives to get tax-deferred money so they don't have to pay anything on it until they cash it out when they retire. And then that was passed on down the ladder to low-level executives and finally regular employees, who 55% of whom will have nothing when it comes time to retire this year. we're going to have 4.5 million people retire, 55% of whom have nothing on which to retire. So the list of people applying to be greeters at Walmart will be longer than the list of people applying to be accepted to Harvard, which, by the way, is no longer a nonprofit. It is a for-profit institution that takes money from its millionaire and billionaire alum that allows their children in through legacy admissions, and has cultivated such extreme right-wing figures as Ted Cruz, as lowly scumbags as Mark Zuckerberg, Bill Gates, and a whole litany of right-wing justices who sat on the Supreme Court. Oh, but JFK went there, so it must be a liberal institution. It's about as liberal as Liberty University, which of course was founded by Jerry Falwell, a man who Christopher Hitchens once said if they had given him an enema after his death, they could have buried him in a matchbox. That's how full of shit he was. And I agree. These ministers and priests who basically spend their time drinking and molesting little boys, especially little boys who come from poor or broken homes, are a disgrace. And I hearken back to that memory Samuel Alito spoke about in 2022 at a conference of Notre Dame alum when he said he was at a museum in Berlin and an affluent woman, or a well-dressed woman, after he realized he'd used the word affluent, with a little boy, and they were looking at an old crucifix on the wall, an old wooden crucifix, and the little boy tugged on the mother's dress and said, "Who is that?" And that memory stuck with him, because a man who may or may not have ever existed at all, and if he did, he certainly had no supernatural ability, drove Sam Alito crazy. And now he won't recuse himself from January 6 proceedings or proceedings that have to do with Donald Trump himself, despite the fact he had the appeal to heaven flag hanging from his beach house in New Jersey. That was Martha Ann's fault too. Or his house in Arlington, Virginia. That was Martha Ann's fault, not me. It doesn't make any difference. Your wife has to understand that you're a justice of the Supreme Court of the United States, but more than that, you're a thug. You're a bully. You know there's nothing Congress can do about it. There's nothing the Senate can do about it because they can't get 67 votes together to impeach his sorry ass. So we're stuck with him until the court can be expanded, which of course is not something you want to run on right now if you're Joe Biden. But in the future, it's not a bad idea. Let's go ahead and discuss expanding the court and diluting the power of a madman, an idiot like Sam Alito, who, by the way, will likely be replaced by whomever is elected president of the United States next. Which means if Joe Biden's reelected, Clarence Thomas and Sam Alito could be replaced by Joe Biden, which means they would be liberal justices that would balance out power in this country. We haven't had a liberal court since roughly 1970. And if you track it, that's when we started seeing this enormous gap in wages. We started seeing this enormous gap in the rich and the poor. We started seeing the necessity for you to have a bachelor's degree to even make a low middle income salary, but you'll be saddled with student debt for the rest of your life. So it's an impossible lose-lose situation for everyone involved except for these wealthy Ivy League assholes who sit on the Supreme Court. Now, that does not include Judge Elena Kagan, Judge Sotomayor, or Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson. Those are solid justices and people who should be applauded for hanging in there despite the fact they're working in the most broken branch of government, the judiciary. As a matter of fact, we should just get rid of the Supreme Court altogether and refer to the D.C. Court of Appeals, which is referred to as the mini Supreme Court anyway, because at least they're governed. They're governed by a board of ethics. They can actually be sanctioned. They can be forced off cases. And by the way, there are more members on that court, 11, than there are on the Supreme Court. So why not expand it to 13 or 15 or 17 or 21 or 23? And I want Sam Alito to stay until he dies so he can watch everything he worked so hard to destroy be rebuilt. That being the Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act, simple gun laws, the rights of gay couples to have cakes made by whomever, and to put gay couples back into a category that can't be discriminated against. And the big one, to watch abortion be legalized from coast to coast and Roe v. Wade become law of the land all over again. And for there be no interference by anybody in the government when it comes to a mother having to make a choice about saving her own life or giving birth to a fetus that is no longer viable at 8 months or 9 months or days before delivery. When it is a terrible decision to have to make, when it's heartbreaking, when someone's at their lowest moment, when their heart is broken, Samuel Alito wants to step in and say, no, you know what? They can both die. They can both die because my God says, well, that's the way it should be. Well, it's not what your God says. For anyone who's read the Bible or been to Bible study at any point in their life, including this old Southern boy who grew up in a Baptist church, and by the way, Baptists aren't crazy about Catholics. They're not even crazy about Methodists. And the only difference is one dunks and the other one sprinkles at baptism, that is, of course. And Methodists are sort of like Baptists without the cocaine. That's where we're at in this country. We have Supreme Court justices who are rooting for sectarian violence and civil war. They have to be silenced. They have to be pushed to the side. And one giant step in doing that was making sure Donald Trump was found guilty on all 34 counts in New York. Why? How do I connect those two? Because it further decreases the odds he'll be elected again. It also increases the odds that Joe Biden will be elected along with a Democratic Senate and a Democratic House, so that we, the American people, can get on with the business of killing the filibuster, getting rid of the Electoral College, granting statehood to both D.C. and Puerto Rico, and at the same time expanding the Supreme Court to, like I said, 15, 17, 21, so that it makes more sense, so that it's well-rounded, so that we, the American people, don't have to worry that the people making these life and death decisions, literal life and death decisions in many cases, are doing it strictly because they've worked for 50 years to rig the Supreme Court in their favor. We'll also see right-to-work laws disappear in this nation, because right-to-work laws really means a right for a corporation to fire you for no reason whatsoever. It means we hate you, working families. We hate you, working class people. That's what we have in Tennessee, and that's what the Supreme Court would force on commonwealths like Massachusetts, like Pennsylvania, like Vermont, like New York, like Hawaii, like California, like Washington. We don't want that. And even the people who vote Republican don't want that, even if they don't realize it at this point, because, well, they've drank the Kool-Aid. They took the red pill. They're down the rabbit hole. Now it's time to drink the Kool-Aid that, lands you right on the comet. Remember that one? Remember what that Kool-Aid had in it? Huh. What a day for America. Congratulations to every pro-democracy American out there who wanted to see justice done. You got to see it today. 34-0, 34 counts, 34 times he was found guilty. So a round of applause for everyone involved in making that happen, from DA Alvin Bragg to the incomparable Judge Juan Merchan. This has been a special update, a breaking news update from the Magnolia Media Network. I'm your host, Jonathan M. Ruggiero. If you enjoy what we're doing here, check us out at patreon.com/Magnolia Media Network. Also, follow me on Instagram. We've got to get to 10,000. I'm at like 300, guys. Help me out. Help me out so I can do some live videos for you when I take walks around my neighborhood, when we talk about these things. Everything from the best movies we've seen lately to what's going on in the world of politics and news. Help us out. Check out that Instagram account. Again, Magnolia John 2024, the year of our founding. It'll stay that way for a long, long time. Check out the videos I've already posted. I've got shorts all over, reels rather, all over Instagram. and Threads, and we appreciate your support so very much. Once again, this has been a breaking news update from the Magnolia Media Network. Again, I'm Jonathan M. Ruggiero. Thank you. We will be back tomorrow with a full-length episode.